That's funny. So Jonah had just finished telling me like how slick I make this look, and then I started with the wrong video clip. So
well, they both look slick. Both
right.
video clips are pretty good. So.
We're not doing a mystery meat sack today, although I want to get that going again too because that was a lot of fun. So let's start from scratch here. It is Tuesday, July 30th. I'm here with my friend Jonah Dempsy. Besides text, we haven't really connected probably since the conference last year, and the Human Design Conference is gearing up to come pretty soon here. But today, we're going to talk about the objective personality system, which so far I know very little about, but I mean, that's what due diligence is about, is kind of that 1% improvement, 1% awareness, strive towards excellencism versus perfectionism, and data is where it's at. So we're dealing with some new data today. So Jonah, good to see you, buddy. Maybe before going into that, just provide a little bit of background for yourself for folks that haven't met you through this channel before, and what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jonah Dempsey. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I first met Sean, I want to say a year and a half ago, something like that. And we were just immediately such a click. I mean, I'm still following up on things that Sean told me in that first 24-hour to 36-hour chat. We hopped on podcasts together. He was on my podcast. I was on your Mystery Meat Sack. Had a lot of fun. And then we ended up hanging out in Seattle, which was great, which is close to where you live you're up in Victoria. Is that right?
Yeah, Sanderson. Yeah, Vancouver Island.
Yeah. And as far as background for me, I mean, I think we first connected on a shared interest in human design, but like yourself, I have a lot of interests, whether it's health, I'm on the cross of healing, or psychology, or Jungian typology. This system we're going to talk about today, the objective personality system, is one of my absolute favorite creations, discoveries, however you want to look at it. Really an incredible system. I'm happy to get a little background on that. But yeah, I'll just say my own personal background is that I've kind of left behind a life as a tech entrepreneur in the big city to come live out in an ancient cow town on a dirt road in Santa Fe and study mysticism and psychology. So that's my story. Does that sound about right? I mean, you've been here. Does that sound like an accurate description?
I've been on the dirt road.
Yeah, out to my house. Yeah.
Experienced all the mystical. I mean, I was at the end of your dirt road one day when my friend Elena suggested I, take my shoes off, stand in the dirt, and put my hands on, what kind of tree is that? The white one?
Could be a cottonwood. Could be. We have a lot of aspens.
Aspen. Yeah. And I've been doing a lot of earthing and grounding and ho'oponopono against trees. I'm calling it tree yoga. And but like I put my hands across against that, and that it was like a sauna tube. Like I could feel the energy in that tree going through it. And so I spent about 10 minutes there hanging outside your house looking like a weirdo. But
well, you fit right in, and believe me, that is Santa Fe in a nutshell. You fit right in. So you're very welcome here.
Okay. Well, I'll be back there in September. Can't wait. So.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. For the HDHD conference this year. Fourth year of the conference.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah.
So, objective personality system. What? Maybe just start with a bit of background. How did it start?
Yeah. I kind of have two goals. One would be to just as a preamble, and then we're going to kind of dig in. But I guess my first goal is just to give a little bit of overview of what the system itself is, where it came from, and then my second is I know you're into human design. I know some of your viewers are probably into human design. I would like to touch on how I see it relating, because I think that's just kind of a nice thing to get out of the way. Not that we can't return to that later in the conversation, but that is kind of just a nice way to set the stage. So first, the objective personality system itself. To summarize it, it is, in my opinion, and probably the opinion of some of the others who've studied it, the single most developed, most sophisticated, and most accurate system of Jungian personality typology in the world. Carl Jung developed his four-function model, which he first released to the world in 1921. This is the function model of thinking versus feeling, sensing versus intuition. This is kind of familiar to people who've learned the Myers-Briggs system, MBTI. And you might get those four-letter type codes like I'm an ENFP and someone's an INFJ and so on.
I'm an INFJ, but I can only remember it.
Yeah, in that system. But we are going to have to see what you end up being in objective personality, which is interesting because there is a way to translate, and I can actually I can get to that in a moment. But essentially, Carl Jung developed this four-function model. It then developed into 8 types by combining with the function attitudes, introversion and extroversion. Myers-Briggs developed it into, or Isabel Briggs-Myers and her daughter developed it into a 16-type system. So then at that point, we had 16 buckets to put people in. That is still used. It's probably one of the most popular personality typing systems in the world. And then starting about 15 years ago, there was a real Renaissance heyday period. I mean, we're really in the heyday now, but the beginning of this Renaissance in Jungian typology began in the early 2010s, where you had a number of independent researchers developing their own systems. And there are actually a number of competing interpretations of Jungian typology. Around that time, a man named Dave Powers started to research all of these systems, Jungian typology, then was joined by Shannon Renee, now Shannon Powers, his wife, his partner. And they first released their findings of the objective personality system, as they called it, in 2017. That was on his YouTube channel, Dave Superpowers. It's not around anymore, but it was really a lot of fun. Now, to find this, you just look up objective personality on YouTube. By 2018, they had really developed the system. In 2017, it was kind of still in its fledgling phase, and they had made a real breakthrough in Jungian typology, which expanded from 16 Myers-Briggs types up to 128. By 2018, they'd expanded this to 512. And last year, they put the sort of finishing touches on the system, expanding up to 2,048 types, which may sound like overkill. But if you realize in human design, if you look at all the configurations of profile and type and everything, I mean, we have a lot more than 2,048, I'll tell you that. So what it's really about is the correct fitting for the data. When you're modeling something, you don't want to be underfitted. You don't want to be overfitted. If you're overfitted, you lose meaningful categories. And if you're underfitted, then you're losing granularity and precision of the data. And you're basically, your model doesn't, it's too low of resolution. So essentially, what they've discovered with the objective personality system is 13 meaningful binary distinctions. So if you do 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 13 times, you get up to 2,048 types. And that's all we're doing. We're just asking, it's not a spectrum. Is it a meaningful distinction? Can we say you're one side or the other of a coin? So this is following, Carl Jung, when he started typology, he had 2 meaningful distinctions. You're either feeling or thinking. You're either intuitive or sensing. Then he added introvert or extrovert. And you can see it went to 8 types. And then with Myers-Briggs, they added judging or perceiving, and it went up to 16 types. And you keep expanding by a binary doubling mechanism. And that's how you end up with so many types, which can be overwhelming or daunting if you think about, like, how am I going to learn these 2,000 types? You don't. You just learn the 13 dichotomies. And it's a lot less daunting to understand 13 binaries. I mean, we already have so many binaries we use all the time in our day-to-day life. This is really just a dualistic system, if you will. And then I guess one other point about it is that it's called the objective personality system because Dave and Shannon Powers really aimed to develop a typology system not based on subjective self-report or fairly subjective assessment by a single individual assessing another. What they did, which was quite novel, is that they would independently type somebody. So they would look at a celebrity, watch some interviews, independently come up with their type, and then kind of like the judges at the end of, a a sport, they would hold up their type at the same time. That way they're not influencing each other. And if they arrived at the same type out of 128, that's impressive. If they arrive at the same type out of 512, that's even more impressive. If they arrive at the same type out of 2048, that is so far beyond chance that it begins to validate the system. And now that they have students, if they have a number of students who also arrive at the same type out of 2048, a lot of credibility. So this is a real problem in personality typology. We don't have this problem in human design. We have a birth time. You just punch in the birth time, you get the answer. In personality typology, this is based on assessment. How do you make it more objective? Well, this is the objective personality system. If you really want to validate your type, you kind of need multiple objective personality operators to independently validate your type. Unfortunately, only Dave and Shan themselves are the official operators. And then there's a couple, Felix and Holly out of Australia, I think, who are kind of somewhat accepted as operators. And then there's a number of student operators who they don't have the same track record, right? But so this really is a goal that eventually there will be objective personality operators that you can be typed by, who can assess your type independently just by watching interview videos of you and things like that.
So you made me think of there's a fellow making the rounds on YouTube. Was formerly CIA, and he kept talking about Myers-Briggs as being like that's all they use. They basically within 3 minutes can assess someone. They just sort of like bang through it. It's fascinating, and I've always wondered.
And I think that's also very true that the CIA does that, and that shows how low tech they are. And people who like to imagine that they're so high tech and that they have the cutting edge, latest, greatest info, they actually do not. That the underground is always going to outpace any large organization because of bureaucratic issues and just information loss through the propagation of information and proximity and things like that. Although Dave and Shan do regularly make comments that they're waiting to be contacted by various government agencies to be hired to develop psychometric systems for them. And I think that, that will eventually happen. It's just like human design, these things take time to grow. And, there are 50,000 subscribers to the Objective Personality YouTube. Of those, only about 2,000 are actively studying it. Of those, only about 200 are actually at the level where they can do a pretty good type assessment. And then probably 20 are kind of at the top of their game. And then, there's a small room of people that are actually devoted to this as a profession.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about this before, but it'd probably be a matter of time before they contact you about human design too. Be like, we need some help. We got this guy's birthday.
Well, here's the thing. I've had a lot of contact with various intelligence agencies. I worked at Amazon. Okay. My boss there had above top secret clearance with the Department of Defense before coming on at Amazon. I knew an ex-CIA operative named Robert Steele. No joke. This guy's name is Robert Steele. Like, is that the most spy name in the world? And sure we used to get drinks, and we used to, we would talk about all sorts of things. I have a good friend here in Santa Fe, Henry Herman, who's a brilliant inventor. He was called the third smartest man in the world by DARPA. He regularly works with various intelligence agencies. He's a private contractor, different things like that. So I have a lot of access to that world. And similarly to the world of celebrities, you've probably heard me say this before, I believe that the mutative core of freaks and mystics and weirdos is the source of the information that then propagates outward to a sort of outer shell of larger organizations, which then take that and spread it to the mainstream. And then in the mainstream, there are imitators of that. So the way I see it is like Dave and Shannon Powers are at the absolute mutative core of the most brilliant breakthroughs in typology. People then take from them, who then present it to other organizations or become life coaches for celebrities or things of that nature. And then those celebrities take these concepts and kind of spread them to the mainstream. And then there are imitators who copy the mainstream. So it's like this game of telephone of just like the core, kind of the mutative core, then the underground, then the mainstream, then the imitators of the mainstream. And that's kind of how I see it. But, all the celebrities are constantly mining the mainstream. You can see that in music, where there are little musical movements, and then a popular artist will mine those movements for material, popularize them, and then they'll have a whole bunch of imitators who aren't really copying the original movement. They're copying the mainstream artist. And then you have imitators of the imitators and imitators of the imitators. And 20 years later, it's a karaoke song. And, so this is kind of just how information propagates outward. But yeah, no, I do think that this stuff does have a lot of value for many, whether it's in things like life coaching and personal development or psychometrics or, however you want to look at it. Yeah.
Interesting. The same as you're saying that, I was just thinking individual, collective, and tribal circuitry too. Like sort of the individual is being observed, it's shared with the collective, the tribal absorbs it. We move forward.
Yeah, or the individual starts making it, and then the tribal turns it into something that's for the select few, and then the collective sort of co-opts it also and says, now this is for everyone, and now it has a Wikipedia page and things like that. I don't even know if the objective personality system has a Wikipedia page. It's a good question. You can tell that the collective has got its hands on it when it has a Wikipedia. That's kind of the sign that the collective has become aware of it. It's become notable to that's like the collective raising its eyebrow. Like, oh, there's a Wikipedia page. Like now the collective's like, what's this?
Well, same can be said for like the human design page is really quite short, considering how vast and there's how much to say about it.
Well, I don't know if you know have I told you my personal connection to the human design Wikipedia page?
Well, I know your body graph's on there, but
which is also a funny thing. I can explain that too. So when I got into human design, so a little background for me, I found out about human design in 2006. It was not my time for it. It's like you have to catch the virus and it has to get in, and it did not get in. I was 22 years old. It didn't get in. My 22-year-old brain, I was into a lot of cool stuff. I couldn't get into human design. And then in 2015, actually, 2015, September 12th, I think I have the exact day, I got a reading, and it was the right time. And it was kind of a low point for me in a lot of ways. And almost like when you're kind of down in the dumps, you can more easily catch a cold. Well, I caught human design. Okay. So it got through to me. I caught the logic virus. The logic virus infected me, and then I couldn't get rid of it. And at that time, there was no Wikipedia page for human design. And I tried to make one, and I realized you couldn't even submit one to be made because there are multiple layers of Wikipedia hell, and human design was in the layer of hell reserved for like hate speech. Like it was reserved in like the deepest layer of like literally you could not even, there's certain pages you can't propose to create because the page is saying something racist or sexist or something bad. You can't even make that page. Like it would just be like a troll page. Human design was considered at that level. It had been appealed so many times and rejected by an editorial review board so many times. And partly it was because this guy, Mike Mahalo or something, had just completely destroyed any chance of getting it made because he had continued to just like sabotage the page or, do edits, or it was just such a like hundreds of edits and reverts and edits and reverts and fighting. It was like a battleground. There were like corpses of the dead editors, in the history of the page. And you couldn't even access it other than to see like all they had was like a discussion page explaining why this page could never be made and explaining why it's not notable and explaining why it's been continually used for blatant self-promotion and continually used like that people attack the page. So any attempt at objectivity and things like that were destroyed. And so I tried to appeal, but I couldn't. And I literally like made it a freedom of speech issue and sent letters because there was no editorial appeal process that it could go through. It was at such a layer of having been appealed and rejected so many times, it couldn't be appealed anymore. And I had to spend about 2 or 3 years fighting to get that page made. And it's in its original form. The only way I could get it made was by saying human design is a pseudoscience purporting to blah, blah, blah. It was so watered down and flowery and just kind of like I had to like really remove any, like there was toothless. It was a completely toothless article. It's the only way I can get it made. And then I had all these copyright issues. I had Ra Uru Hu's body graph because I'm like, of course, his body graph should be there. And I was actually getting copyright takedowns. And then somebody said, well, you don't have the right. This came up in astrology groups. You don't have the right to share someone's private details unless it's this or that, or I don't even know what. Like it was like, as policy, you need permission from the person whose body graph you're featuring because he's dead. You can't get his permission. Like all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, I will use my body graph. And even still with mine, there were complaints. I mean, the people had it out for the page. Like, there were enemies of the human design page. There were editors who were trying to find any little nitpicky thing to get it removed. And they were saying things like, okay, well, that's using copyrighted software. And then I said, well, it's a small enough resolution image that it falls within the guidelines. I mean, this was a legal battle. Like, someday there will be a courtroom drama of Jonah versus the editors of Wikipedia for creating the human design page. So yeah, this was about 3 years of my life that I spent getting that page made. And yeah, it is very short. It has about 20 references for notability. I'm glad that it no longer has some of the poor descriptions it had when it started about being a pseudoscience, things like that. It's a little more developed now. But yeah, this is kind of what it's like trying to get something into the collective, right?
It's insane, right? It's insane. So thank you for persisting with that, because it needs a page, and maybe now that it's got some teeth, it'll grow or be allowed to grow.
It has one tooth. It has one tooth. It doesn't have teeth yet. It just has one tooth. Maybe it'll get a second tooth eventually. Maybe it'll get some teeth. Yeah.
No, thanks for sticking through that. I think that was important. So cool. All right. We've taken 15 minutes to start talking about the objective personality system. That's my fault, because this is a fantastic conversation. As soon as we start talking about CIA and courtroom drama, I was actually thinking too, someone could reenact that as a play at the conference. Maybe the courtroom battle. That might be fun.
The courtroom battle between, yeah, that would be great, over the fate of the human design Wikipedia page. That'd be good.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Good material. So, okay, back to, can I call it OPS? Like,
yes, that is what it's called. People say the objective personality system, or OPS for short. Absolutely.
Okay. Cool. So we got some background on it. A little bit like Myers-Briggs. A lot of it is it this or is it that, right? So it sounds like an eye exam, which I don't know about you, but I don't do well in eye exams, because it's like, is it, the first one or the second one? I'd be like, the first one was kind of blurry, but the second one was easier to see. Can I, and you just find yourself flipping back and forth. Is it kind of like that until you get?
I mean, this is the challenge. And if you become a student of objective personality, then what they do is have different people they type each week for their students. It's $19 a month. You can sign up on objectivepersonality.com with Dave and Shan. I've also been teaching. I have 16 students currently in my class, and we're having a great time learning this. And we also do typings. But essentially what you do is each week they have a different person to type. Last week was David Lynch. They recently did Jason Momoa. So usually celebrities or internet people or politicians or historical figures, preferably somebody that we can watch a lot of interviews with. It's harder if it's somebody that's from the past that you can't. I mean, they've done like Thomas Edison, but it's harder if you can't, if you can't watch interviews with them. And then each of these 13 coins, as they're called, the binaries that make up type, essentially you're looking for certain patterns or tells that will indicate to you what side of the coin they fall on. And they are actually pretty clear. I mean, it's mind-boggling and amazing to me, the work of narrowing down of all the 1,000 possible patterns you could look for to find the needle in the haystack of what actually works every single time. It's like, this pattern works 60% of the time. This works 80%. This works 95%. Well, they have somehow found definitions and core essential patterns that work 100% of the time if you truly follow them. But as you're saying, anytime you're categorizing, there's going to be this question, which box does it fit in? Mm-hmm. And there are so many stereotypes coming from Myers-Briggs. It's almost easier if you don't have a background in Myers-Briggs. Because if you have a background in Myers-Briggs, you have all these stereotypes like this type likes history, and this type loves Christmas, and this type loves this, and this type likes that. And none of those work. They might even work 90% of the time. Usually it's closer to 50 or 60. But none of them work 100% of the time because they haven't narrowed down the exact precise definitions and essences of what that distinction is about. And that's why I say we are in a complete renaissance of personality typology. Jung would have tears of joy if he could see the outcome of the fruits of his labor being developed by Dave and Shannon Powers, because they have developed the system so well and also acted as goalies to keep out so many wrong patterns. And they've rejected so many attempts by other researchers and students and other typologists who've come to them and said, well, does this fit? Does that fit? And they really do look into it, sometimes for multiple years, and then go, no, it doesn't, and keep it out of the system. So it's not just what's in the system, it's what's out of the system as well. It's what they've said no to, what they've rejected, what they've pushed away. which is hard to do, right? Because sometimes you get some shiny new pattern or shiny new breakthrough and it seems so cool, but then you have to do a lot of diligence. We're on due diligence here, and diligence is part of it, like diligent effort, looking through so many cases and asking themselves, does this pattern actually hold up at scale? Because it's one thing to find a pattern that works for a few people, but the plural of anecdote is not data. And you have to find a pattern that works for everyone in the data set. So just as an example, when they expanded to 512 types in 2018, they already had people asking, do we need this many types? Well, those types have held up. They never went back on that. But then in 2023, they added 2 new coins, doubling 512 and then doubling again up to 2048. And then there was a lot of pushback. People in the community said, why do we need these 2 new coins? Can't these coins be explained by the existing coins? Are these really meaningful buckets we can put people in? Are these actual categories, or can we eliminate these categories, keep the 512 types, and find other explanations? And over time, and it's only been maybe 18 months, but over time, it has been revealed that no, these are 2 meaningful new coins, much to the chagrin of the researchers who didn't want to have to learn them, and they do hold up, and that they do even offer more clarity and explanatory power to the previous dichotomies, because we're no longer trying to explain things with an underfitted model. It's amazing, right? It's kind of this is science. This is science. That's the only way I can say it. It's like watching a scientific breakthrough, social science, but still science.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I just want to talk about, but I'll just park away maybe for later. The I Ching, and like there's coins, right? And effectively, like to me, I just want to go
Well,
there.
it's all binary too, because I Ching
Right.
is yin yang and is well. And I did say in the beginning that I do want to touch on, and maybe I think it is better to front load this. What is the connection of the objective personality system to human design, which
Sure.
also has a basis in the I Ching hexagrams and is also a dualistic system of binaries.
Do you want to do that now? Or expand
Yeah, I
on
think
that?
so. I think we can at least touch on it. I can say that if you are a human design student, researcher, analyst, consultant, however you want to look at it, and if you're interested in learning personality typology, I would love to hear your feedback on this, because for a number of years I looked for the Holy Grail, which was how to collapse personality typology systems into the human design body graph, meaning how can we eliminate the need? Because if you could predict someone's personality type from their body graph, you don't need the personality type system anymore. It's simply another vocabulary for describing the body graph. So I looked for this holy grail of predicting personality type, couldn't find it. By the way, it's also the holy grail because then you wouldn't need anyone to assess type. You would just plug in your birth data and it would tell you your personality type. How cool would that be? What I finally realized, and this is the conclusion I've come to, is that personality typology is literally about the personality crystal, what we call the crystal of consciousness. There's 2 crystals of consciousness, design and personality in the form. But really, technically, the personality crystal hovers above the top of the head. And then the design crystal is in the third eye, or the ajna. And these crystals of consciousness that we study in human design, the personality crystal reincarnates. Sometimes the design crystal reincarnates too. It's a whole complex topic. But we know that the personality crystal does reincarnate. It does come back again and again and again. Well, what do we know about reincarnation from studying Ra Uru Hu's material on incarnation sequencing? We know that the secrets of incarnation are held in the tarot and in the cards of the Magi. Which is really interesting. If you study cards of destiny or love cards, they talk a lot about reincarnation, and you were this card in a past life, and this is a past life connection, and all these things. And we also know that when you look at the incarnation sequences, the only guarantee that you have is that the base does not change. The line you're born into changes, your profile changes, the centers you have defined, the channels, the gates, the activations, the colors, the tones, all change. Your incarnation cross changes. All of the times of year you're born change into different godheads. All of the different aspects of the body graph change, life to life to life to life. What remains the same? The personality crystal. So my theory, and this was disappointing to me, but now I've just kind of accepted it, is that what we are studying with these 13 dichotomies of personality are what remains the same life after life. Not only what remains the same, but the only way reincarnation researchers can meaningfully identify the same person from their reincarnation, because they have the same personality. You recognize their personality. You recognize certain facial expressions. You recognize certain ways of being. You essentially recognize their face, which is the emotive expression of the personality, not the body graph.
So if base is consistent, doesn't base need to be down to 10 seconds though? Like
No,
accuracy?
Rob misspoke. It's 7.5 minutes at the level of the sun. It's 30 seconds for the moon. But we don't really look at lunar base. We don't even know if lunar base means anything. That's the fastest. So the moon's the fastest moving celestial body that activates, and it changes base every 30 seconds. But there's no interpretive value of lunar base that we know of. So when we talk about your personality base, we're looking at the sun, and that's 7.5 minutes.
So base is 7.5 minutes from the sun. Because I've someone else said to me, it takes 8 minutes for what you see of the sun to get here. So it's almost kind of like that.
We're seeing 8 minutes delay. Like if the sun blew up, it would have already blown up, and then for 8 minutes, we would still be seeing the light. Yeah, it's like 8 light minutes away.
It's more like it's 7.5 minutes. Like really, it is the
7.5 light minutes away. Oh my God, you just cracked the code. I love that.
If that's truly your imprinting, that's the thunderclap from the top, right? And so
it's an interesting question whether the speed of light and distance of the sun have any connection to the subdivision of the ecliptic by 69,000 parts, which is what you do if you're 69,000 and change subdivisions. That's how many bases there are, because we divide the ecliptic by 64 gates. Then each gate has 6 lines. Each line has 6 colors. Each color has 6 tones. Each tone has 5 bases. It ends up being 69,000 and change subdivisions. So it is interesting when you divide that, the annual cycle of the year, 365.25 days, you end up with 7.5 minutes at that smallest subdivision. And yeah, that is interesting that that's close to the 8 minutes, approximately
10 minutes, obviously.
The distance of the sun. Yeah, I've never made that connection, and I don't know if it's a good question of whether that's just. I mean, as soon as you get into math, a lot of times too, the math just kind of matches up, but we also have to ask, is there meaningful interpretive value in that? But that is an interesting connection. Thank you for making that connection. I think it's
whoever said 8 minutes was rounding up for the rest of us.
Well, yeah, you can get the exact distance of the sun. I'll resist my urge to Google it right now, but you can get the exact time.
Okay, I'll leave you that. You let me know what you find out, because I'm sure that'll.
I'll let some defined head Ajna solve it.
So we're gonna, I think, kind of like go in and experiment with this, right? So we got about 35 minutes here. I think you said this can take quite a bit of time, right?
Yeah, we'll just see how far we get. I mean, we're going to do something kind of unorthodox. If you really wanted to get typed in the objective personality system, you could send a typing video where you answer a number of questions to Dave and Shan, and then they would watch your video and then assess you. Or there's a free typing service called the Cognitive Resolution Group, which is a number of students. I think they're up to 14 or 15 teams of 4 people each. You get assigned to one of the teams. They watch your video, they assess you, and then, that's kind of their practice. That's how they're practicing learning typology. So it's kind of like getting a student haircut or something. It might not be, but it might be really good, right? There are some very talented, gifted people in that. So basically what we would normally do, and I actually have these questions, I could ask you the questions. What we would normally do is have you answer a whole bunch of questions and then submit the video. And then I and the other people typing you would just watch the video. So it's a little different. What I was going to do today was actually kind of, in a way, very unorthodox. I would talk to you and teach the dichotomies as we go, and then see what you self-assess as, see what side you think you're on, which might not be correct. And it's totally fine if it's not. And there's no shame in it. It's kind of like, well, I see myself this way. The funny thing is, it's so dualistic, it's so binary that oftentimes we see ourselves. It's like, even that's a binary. How I see myself and experience myself is the opposite of how I appear to others in the world. So then it's like asking, like, not only how you see yourself, but how do you see other people seeing yourself? It gets very meta, right? It's kind of like I see myself as a very withdrawn person. I'm like a raging extrovert. You know, I can be totally withdrawn, but I'm still like extrovert to the extreme. Like when we met in Seattle, you're like, what should we do, Jonah? I'm like, here's 8 things. Let me drag you along with me to like 8 different things out in the world. Like, let's just like go extrovert a ton out in the world. It remains to be seen if you're an extrovert or an introvert, right? In Myers-Briggs, you test an INFP, introvert, but it remains to be seen because those tests are relying on self-assessment and they're not using the same patterns that we're looking at. They're not using the same core coins. So yeah, I think what we should do is start at the top, start with the first coin, and we'll just kind of work our way down and try to essentially do our best to guess what we think you are for each of the coins.
Yeah, well, I'll say 2 things to that too before we start. I would describe myself as an extroverted introvert, and there's reasons within my design why I feel that stands now. And then the other thing is, I wonder, being a sacral generator, if when you ask questions to get me not thinking, can you ask yes/no questions to come up with the result of each? Because you use the word think there, like, in a sense, thinking that.
Sure. Yeah, but it's because it's about the awareness that you have. And I think the yes/no questions are for decisions. It's not a crystal ball. Like if I'm like, will this ticket win the lottery tomorrow? You can't be like, tell me, sacral, tell me, will this win? So it's the sacral is not going to be accurate about things that require the awareness of the mind. And so really, when I look at human design, I delineate between mechanics, which is where we get our decision making, awareness, which is where we learn and grow and change, and basically the only place where we really have any chance to try and strive and learn and all that, and gain wisdom. And then I have purpose, which is what are we really here to do? And our purpose is not just mechanics, although mechanics help us get to our purpose. And nor is our purpose just to be aware, although the awareness can also help us get to our purpose because we can stop interfering with the mechanics. So I would just say the short version is, because we know that the personality crystal reincarnates and the body graph is different every single time, we know that there's going to be every possible permutation ever. There's going to be a manifestor who's this way, and a reflector who's this way, and a generator and a projector. There's going to be a defined solar plexus and an undefined. There'll be a defined G and an undefined G. Each of the categories that we study in human design are going to have a version for each of these types, which is infuriating, right? It's like, it would be so easy if we could just collapse it. I mean, that's what humans are always trying to do. We're always trying to not have to learn something new. Like, don't make me learn something new. Let me just collapse this into my existing top-down processing and explanatory framework, because that's efficient. And we are efficiency machines attempting to, encode vast amounts of information into a compressed space of understanding. Question from Elena Smith. Hi there, Elena. I hope you can come to HDHD this year. I wasn't sure. I would love for you to join.
You met her last year. That's what
I mean. I hope you can come back. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I hope you can come back. That was so great having you. I know you're. This is, for those who don't know, this is Sean's birthday twin. It's your neighbor, right? You're a 3-5 and she's a 4-1.
She's a 4-1. She's born a day and a time zone apart.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
very
exactly.
close. Yeah, she was asking what is this called, which is why I flashed up the banner at the bottom again there for you.
Oh, so, good. Yeah. So we're talking about the objective personality system developed by Dave Powers and Shannon Powers. You can find out about it at objectivepersonality.com or on my Instagram. I post blurbs, but I also like to send people to them. Yeah, and also the question about the dream rave. Yeah, the difficulty there, I mean, the dream rave does play a part, but the difficulty is every single lifetime you get a different body graph. We know this. Everything's different in the body graph. In fact, Chetan Parkin, who I know you've chatted with, you connected me with, Sean, he said that his friend likes to call the body graph a karma chart, because based on what you did in your previous life, and based on what you're here to learn in this life, and based on all these different factors, you get different activations. You get openness at a particular place because that's what you're here to learn. You get definition in a particular place because that's something you've already learned, and you're here to now teach and to bring to others and give to others and put out into the world. And so your body graph is sort of the representation of what you've unlocked in this life through previous karmas. And it changes every single life. 100% of the activations change, 100% of the center. I mean, obviously there can be overlap randomly, like you might end up with the same center multiple lives in a row. But my point is, if we know that we can identify people, at least somewhat, through reincarnation research, we can recognize them from previous lifetimes. For instance, Ra Uru Hu is pretty often recognized as William Quan Judge. Numerous reincarnation researchers have made this connection. If you look up William Quan Judge, one of the founders of the Theosophical Society, you look up Ra Uru Hu, not only do they have a striking physical resemblance, but if you read their works, they have a striking resemblance in their personality. Their body graphs are very different. There are some commonalities. They're both manifestors. Judge was an emotional manifester, I think a 3-5. Ra was a 5-1, splenic ego manifester. And, but I mean, I guess my point is just, if you really look at how reincarnation works, the only thing that's being recognized as the same person is the personality. So what we're studying in the objective personality system is literally the thing that never changes. Life after life after life. We're stuck. It's almost a drag. We're stuck being ourselves. I'm a 5-1 sacral generator. I come back and I'm an emotional projector. Same personality. And people will recognize me because this personality is a big part of who I am. Now, yes, we have personality activations in the body graph, but we have to remember the body graph is a quantum of the personality and design activations, and that's literally just showing conscious and unconscious life force energy, which is a mechanical thing. It's the mechanics of the aura. It's the mechanics of the life force energy. The life force energy changes. I'm a generator. I might come back with an undefined sacral. It might be a projector or a manifester. It might be a reflector, right? We come back as different types, different auras, different mechanics, and yet we somehow recognize the same person in the visage of their expressive face, in their hand gestures, in their gait. You can do gait analysis of how they walk, in their word choice, in the way they write and communicate. It's like, yeah, I have an activation in gate 12 in this life, so I might be a little more articulate, but it's the same personality. And if I'm in a different life, I don't have gate 12, I'm less articulate, but it's the same personality trying to express. And it's expressing through the activations of the body graph. Any comments, Sean?
Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, I've heard like Ra or someone describe, like, you look at the personality, the black lines in the black gates, those are the roads that you traveled. It's what's familiar to you. So if my personality is familiar to me because I just keep showing up as that person. And then the design are tunnels. You have to get into the tunnel to drive on the road. So for me, to learn human design, it's worked for me is I've been splitting the two aside, like using neutrino design. Nathan showed me that I could just look at the personality side and then the design side. And so I actually discarded the personality side previously, being like, roads travel, I don't need to look into that. But if that's where the familiarity is, anyways, I put that aside. Then I just started digging into design. Okay, this is the vehicle. I'm in this vehicle for this lifetime. Might as well figure this shit out because everything is not working. And so when I lean into it, the more I lean into it, the more the electricity happens. And so, but it's interesting. I had basically pushed aside the personality, going, been there, done that, instead of actually digging in a little deeper to.
Well, yeah, and yet we know that even the personality activations are not the personality; it's what the personality plugs into. And we also know that while there is value in looking at the design and the personality activation separately, in fact, that's how Rob began teaching human design, was looking at them separately and then looking at them together. We do know that it's the quantum of how they come together that creates the channels and the life force energy. And I guess what I'm saying is simply that you've had many lifetimes, you've had different personality and design activations each time. Those are the tools that you have brought with you in order to fulfill your purpose. And the need to allow the mechanics to do the work That's what human design is about. It's about awakening the passenger consciousness that allows the mechanics of the design to make the decisions which lead you to fulfilling your life purpose. Meanwhile, what does the passenger do? What does the awareness do? Gains wisdom, and it learns in the openness. It goes to school in the open centers. It goes to school in the harmonic gates, from the hanging and dormant gates. So essentially, what we're doing as passengers, as personalities, is we incarnate, we experience this form we've incarnated in. The personality activations are still part of that form. As I was saying, like, I have gate 12. Doesn't matter if it's personality or design, right? I have gate 12 activated. That allows me to be articulate in this life. In previous life, maybe I didn't have gate 12. It's still the same personality. I'm just hampered in that life by not being able to express from the throat in an articulate manner. Maybe I had a different gate that expressed a different way. So the personality is the thing trying to express itself. It's also the thing learning and being educated and gaining awareness. And based on the awareness it gains, it has a chance at getting out of the way of the mechanics. One of the great quotes, something James Alexander likes to say, quoting Ra, people always say no choice. And then James Alexander follows up and says, yeah, but Ra said, it means no choice, not that there's no chance. And I love that there actually is a chance at life. And what is that chance? It's the chance for the passenger to wake up, to become aware, to notice the patterns, and then somehow the patterns magically stop repeating when you become aware of them. And that's what we've noticed from in all different mystical traditions, that the awakening kind of permanently breaks the ability for that thing to continue repeating. It's almost like it was only repeating until the passenger learned. And as soon as the passenger learned, it's like, okay, you learned. Now the mechanics can operate. You can get out of the way of them and go on to learn the next thing. Where else are we getting in the way of ourselves? Where else are we trying to make a mental decision because we're triggered and anxious and nervous and afraid and all of these things? And so I think, if anything, what objective personality is showing us is where we get triggered and where we need to surrender more. And the funny thing is, we actually have probably been getting triggered in that way for 10, 20, 30, 40 lifetimes. It's not a new thing. It's like a permanent facet of the eternal reincarnating personality, that every lifetime it's coming in with the same fundamental disposition. It has new tools available to it. It's like, oh, you have a defined G center. Okay, you've packed a bag with a compass this year. Next year you might not have a defined G, or last year maybe you didn't, but this year you packed a compass. Why? Because you need that compass for fulfilling your purpose this time around. But when we talk about life purpose, people act as if it's the biggest thing in the world. Well, it's the biggest thing for this life, but there's also a soul purpose, which is bigger than any one lifetime's purpose. And the life purpose, Ra fulfilled his life purpose in bringing human design to the world. In a previous incarnation as William Quan Judge fulfilled his purpose bringing the Theosophical Society into the world. And yet, what is the purpose of that eternal soul of Ra's? That's the purpose of growing and gaining wisdom and developing and so on. So, of course, in the case of someone like Ra, it's kind of a special case because he might, have been more like one of those great bodhisattva, avatars who kind of came back to help us. There's actually somebody, there's a side note, there's somebody on Facebook who's been posting that Ra, even though he said he was never going to reincarnate, is actually back here among us. And I'm like, how do you know this? They're like, oh, my spirit guides told me. But I just love this idea, regardless of any truth. I love this mythos that Ra was like, I'm never coming back. This is the last. This is the end of it. This is the last incarnation. And then people are like, no, actually, he came back. I mean, it feels like we're kind of in the Middle Ages again. They're like, Ra has returned. So I love this this kind of underground mythos of human design. But again, if he returned, he might not be a manifester. He might not have a defined spleen. He might not have a defined G center. He might not have channel of initiation, defined ego. All those things are subject to change. So our immediate impulse is to try to explain the personality through the body graph. But instead, we have to imagine that there is this thing that keeps coming back each time with a different costume, a different costume of purpose, as Ra liked to call it. It's almost like you're disincarnate and you're waiting there, and the Godhead comes to you and says, it's it's Toth, and Toth says, Sean, I have made you a wonderful costume of purpose. You have a defined ajna, and you have the 659, and you're like, no, I don't want that. And then, Lakshmi comes. I have made you the most beautiful costume of purpose, Sean. I'm giving you the 952. You'll be able to concentrate endlessly. You're like, no, I don't want that. And then finally they're like, you have all the verbal gunslinger channels. You're like, yes, I'll take it. And you jump in with this pact G to throat. We've made you an alpha MG. Like, you're like, okay, I'll jump in. Fine. But I love the idea that it's like the same personality that's being presented different options for the costume purpose, and then you incarnate into that to fulfill that purpose. But it's not that we can then predict who you really are from your body graph or your karma chart.
So many things there. But with 18 minutes left.
No. I can go for another half an hour. I have another half an hour. Okay. If you have the time, we can do another half an hour.
Just like something you said there, like, I have 10 channels. 15 if you take in the 4 worlds and Eleanor's work.
Yeah.
So I just feel like
I think we all have like a bunch of channels if you take it. But okay, but you have 10 in your human design body graph. Got it.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like a underachiever. So I feel pressure, right? So when we have these kind of conversations, like, fuck, am I ever?
You feel like an underachiever because you're not fully utilizing. I don't know. I think you're kind of an overachiever. If anything, Sean. I would never call you an underachiever. I would never call you that. But that is part of your role, though. You're a 3/5, and if we look at the third line keynotes and how the third line responds, I actually really love Richard Rudd's work on the lines in particular. He says that the third line responds to no pressure, and that as soon as it gets the pressure, it starts to crumble and have anxiety and all these things. And it's like, it starts to feel shame. Like, I'm not living up to the pressure. And so shame is this huge shadow keynote for the third line. But I think it's just putting it in the context of what is your purpose here. Why are you a 3/5 and not a 3/6 and not a 2/5 and not a 4/1 like, Elena, and not a 1/3 or not a 5/1 like me? So, I mean, it's like, obviously you have a particular purpose that is sort of a mystery that we get to discover our purpose through following the mechanics. And you have everything you need. And somehow you need to be a third line personality for this purpose to be fulfilled. You wouldn't be able to get your job done if you weren't a third line. Like, Ra had to be a 5/1 to get human design out there in the world. Well, when he had previously incarnated as William Quan Judge was a 3/5. He didn't need to be a 5/1. He had a different life. He needed to be rough and tumble. He needed to be more resilient. He needed to be able to get out there and make mistakes and be part of the material and part of the Maya. I mean, we call the third line the builder of the Maya. Like, it's basically, what did you come equipped with in this life? And I think it's actually a relief, because if anything, it takes the pressure off. It makes you realize you don't have to be everything. You only have to be what you are. And you only really have to be a 3/5 this life. You probably will be a 5/1 next life, or who knows what, right? And so it's kind of like, it's like your turn to be a 3/5, and then it's next year, so to speak. I always think of it like years. Like, I think of it like summer camp. Like, we're going back to school or something. And it's like, what did you pack? And it's like, oh, I'm getting old. Well, I'll see you guys next year. And then I like decarnate and die and then come back again, 50 years later or 1 year later or whatever. And then it's kind of like, oh, great to see you again. I missed you guys. It's kind of, that's how I see reincarnation happening. It's like, from the perspective of the soul, it's a year. From our perspective, it's an entire lifetime. Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with a few of the dichotomies. Let's see where we get. And I think this has been a wonderful conversation. But yeah, I have about half an hour. Let's just see. We don't have to get through all of them. Let's just start at the sort of the fundamentals, and we'll just see where we end up. And we'll just see if any of these are clear, if any of these are obvious, or if they're not obvious. Okay, so, again, I'm very unorthodox here. I'm going to tell you the dichotomies, which is kind of like spoiling it. But in my defense, people who come into the objective personality system read them anyway, and they immediately start to ask themselves, am I this or that? So I'm not really doing anything different than what people normally would do. Okay, the first dichotomy that we look at is observers versus deciders. And technically, these are essentially, this comes from the work of Jung. I won't give too much context here because it's but for people who have a background in Jung or Myers-Briggs, this is like the perceiving versus judging dichotomy in some sense. And I know that in Myers-Briggs, you got perceiving, INFP. However, they're not really looking at the same thing. If we were to look at what makes somebody an observer or a decider, and the technical term is a single observer or a single decider. Single because that's like the one thing that they are really good at, one orientation of being an observer or one orientation of being a decider. But we kind of generalize it to observers versus deciders. So we have observers versus deciders. If we look at this as at a deep, deep essence of an evolutionary imperative almost, it's that we're all trying to survive. We're all wired to survive in the Maya, in the world in a different way. And we're all wired to essentially be afraid of something that could impede our survival. This is like deep evolutionary psychology. This is the deep program at work. This is how the program has programmed even our personalities to be oriented in a certain way. And the observer is fundamentally afraid of being stuck, falling in a hole, starving to death, getting lost in the forest, getting trapped, getting stuck in a rock, like 127 hours. The rock falls and the dude gets stuck. They're fundamentally afraid of things. They're worried about things. People are safe. People are considered safe. Things are the danger. So if you're an observer, and also we can think of the observer as somebody who's here to observe the world of things. They're here to kind of see the world in a way. They're observing in the sense of noticing how to get ahead in life. What we look for with observers is navigational talk, pathway talk. What's the path forward? What's the next step? How do I get there? They're fundamentally worried about making their own path forward and getting stuck and not being able to take the next step. All of that language is around pathways and things. Deciders, it's fundamentally nervous about people. Things are safe. The decider is worried about being judged. They can also get stuck, but what are they stuck on? They're stuck on people. They're stuck on people's points of view. They're stuck on that person doesn't understand me. That person doesn't like me. That person thinks I'm an idiot. That person, what am I going to do about them? Everything is about the people who judge them, and everything is fundamentally people oriented. It's almost that they live in a world of people. Things, yeah, they break, they work, not a big deal. Your car breaks, you get it fixed. Observer has an observer freak out. Oh my God, my car's broken. What, like the observer is constantly worried about the thing, and the decider is constantly worried about the person. And this goes to a deep evolutionary level of like an observer is worried about falling in a pit and dying because they got stuck in a pit. The decider is worried about the people turning on them and killing them because they need the tribe to support them, and the tribe gets together and runs them out of town, and they starve to death because the people wouldn't support them. The people didn't like them. So it's kind of like, where are you fundamentally tuned? I mean, even just this dichotomy is so profound because it is a difference, right? It is a very big difference. So I would maybe ask you maybe two questions. One is, where do you think you fall on this coin? And then where do you think I fall on this coin? And we can see if one of those is an easier question to answer than the other.
Wow, you threw me for a loop because I wasn't thinking about you through that. I was feeling it viscerally in my body as you were describing.
Well, which one do you feel? Let's start with you.
Well, when you said observer, I thought, nope, that's not me. Quad left. Like I immediately went to everything I know about my experiments so far. And I was like, nope, alpha, it's on me to decide. My lifestyle, I choose simple clothes just because I make so many decisions every day that I have decision fatigue as an entrepreneur and in my busy life that I created that was a mess. So the whole time, like, nope, not an observer. But as you talk through it, I was like, nope, that's feeling more and more real. And I was sinking into it. And then you went to decider and, and the body fears and the defined spleen. Like my brain was going all over the place. But I know at the end of it, I was feeling a no in my body about decider. Like it was like, that's what I think I am, but that's not what I am. So it was quite.
Sorry, do you want to guess for me, or then I can also tell you some of the complexities, maybe?
Well, so let me think about you and what I know of you and our interactions. So Well, I mean, I want to say observer. That's
Yeah,
what.
do I feel afraid of being judged, or do I feel afraid of being stuck? Am I afraid of not being able to go to the next thing, or am I afraid of being like, am I stuck on what people think of me? Do I come to you with problems, or do I come to you with people problems or thing problems? Is it more likely that I'm like, Sean, what am I going to do about this person? This person's really stressing me. Or it's like, Sean, what am I going to do about this thing? This thing is stressing me out. Like, which stressor do I come to you with? Is it what people think of me, their points of view? They don't understand me. They don't see what I do for them. They judge me harshly. I mean, here's the other. Okay, maybe I can talk a little bit about the complexities as well.
Mhm.
So, observers will often complain about people. Why? Because they're not worried about being judged for complaining. They're not really in touch with how it looks to complain. If you complain a lot, you can look like a really negative, nasty person. But if you're not worried about being judged, you can be like, oh, yeah, that person totally sucks. Oh my God, I can't stand that person. That person's an idiot. It's almost like they don't really ask the question, am I allowed to have this opinion? You hear this term allowed a lot from deciders. Like, are you allowed to do that? Am I allowed to do this? Like, there's almost like a giving themselves permission to let themselves express negativity for the decider. For the observer, you hear, no, 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 that person's totally, I had a terrible time on the vacation with them. And you're like, oh, this person might be a decider. They're talking about people. Then you're like, no, they're an observer. They had a terrible time because that person was like a ball and chain, not letting them do what they wanted to do, impeding their ability to go forward. They were stuck with them. I'll complain about somebody I'm on a trip with, but well, that's the question though. Am I a decider or observer? Maybe I'm spoiling it too much, but if I'm a decider, I'm going to complain about people. And it's more like, can you believe that they thought it was okay to eat a tuna sandwich? Can you believe they thought it was okay to cook tuna in the shared microwave? Like, why would they do that? And it's kind of like this, like, what kind of person thinks it's okay to do that? Are they allowed to do that? Whereas the observer is much more like, oh man, they didn't plug in the hot water heater and now there's no hot water. This totally sucks. And you're like, does the person suck, or does it just suck that you can't do the thing you wanted to do? It's like, is the thing the problem or is the person the problem? So, but one last little point about that: observers will often present as deciders, and deciders present as observers. The version of this is that the observer will say, "I'm a decider," and you're like, "Why?" And they're like, "Because I've been trying to do this and this and this, but my girlfriend is constantly this way, and my mom's this way, and my best friend is always doing that." Like, they'll talk a lot about people, and you have to cut through all the people talk and realize, one, they're expressing a lot of negativity about people because they're not afraid of being judged. Two, what this person really needs to do is, for instance, go back to college, but they won't go to college because there's a ton of paperwork and bureaucracy and they're afraid of all the paperwork. So it's a thing problem. And then they're displacing all of this like need to do something to make the pathway forward in life. And then they're just expressing all this negativity about all the people as a way of blaming others for why they can't get ahead in life. The decider has their own version of that. The decider says they have thing problems, and the decider is like, I just need to do the thing. Like, I just need to go back to school to get the degree, or I just need to, quit this job so I can do something else in my life. And it seems like they're in the world of things, but at the end of the day, they're very, very concerned about how others see them, and either concerned that they're doing something unique that others don't appreciate, or that they're working really hard and overextended helping others and people don't appreciate them. It's kind of like the song of the decider is like, those people don't get me, or those people don't understand me, or like they're kind of stuck processing the other people's point of view. Like, how could anyone be so negative about that? How could anyone not, like, can you believe it? The decider is almost like, can you believe people actually believe this crap? Can you believe that people actually do this? They're like shocked at other people. They can't process the other person's point of view. They can't digest it. They can't just be okay with it. The observer is kind of like, yeah, people are cool. People suck. Sometimes they're nice. Sometimes they're mean. Yeah, they like you. Then they hate you. Like, whatever. People are just people. Like, they're very like laissez-faire, like bland, blah, neutral about people. Deciders are like, oh my God, can you believe what that person did? Like, there's a little bit of like outrage about it. So,
So
yeah.
I'm
Yeah. So
struggling
anyway, do you have
this
any
question.
thoughts now based on that complexity?
Well, I think I have a question because I'm like, the whole time my head is just launching. So I'm like having to come back with each sentence. But um, I don't feel safe complaining about other people. But I wonder if that's the conditioning in the environment I'm in. But I want to so badly. I had such a bad week last week, stress and financially. And at the end of the day, like just broke down. And it was, but finally reached out for help and to friends and just had to dump on other people. And I didn't even feel safe dumping on other people because I don't like to do that. Like it was but I had to. And then
Yeah.
once it was released, it was huge. Like all I needed to do was talk. I didn't need, part of me wanted to go to violence. Part of me wanted to go to fuck it, just
Yeah.
planet.
No, I think that is, well, so I personally, by the way, have already kind of thought about it and typed you in advance as a decider. And I was open to being wrong. And now, by the way, do you have a guess for me?
Yeah. So objective is complaining about people.
The
Or not
observer. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. The observer, deciders complaining about people, observers complaining about things. But no, well, sorry. No. No, I'm wrong. Observers complain about people, but they're not stuck on people. So
Yeah.
observers are more comfortable, like would be the opposite of you in that regard. Like I'm pretty sure you're a decider. I already assessed you as a decider. You're confirming it. You do raise a good question of, is it conditioning? I don't think so, because one of the really cool, mind-blowing things about objective personality is that it seems to work identically, whether you're not self and conditioned or true self. The way I explain that is simply that the not self is sort of the very limited one-sided version of the personality, and that the true self is, like you're saying, as a decider, becoming comfortable complaining about people, becoming comfortable, like overcoming the fear of being judged. Like that is the growth. So I do kind of see, like, your type never changes and we can't even really hide it. We just like grow into our discomfort more. We become more comfortable in the areas we used to be really triggered, and that's what human design helps with. But yeah, so I guess I do agree that you're a decider. I'm pretty sure about that. I even have more cross references for it because some of the coins cross reference decider, and those also match. My question would simply be, do you think I'm the same as you, or am I somebody who's like if you come to me and you're like, is that person allowed to do that? I'm like, oh no, they're totally not allowed. They completely suck. Next. like, like that's kind of, you know what I mean? Like I just kind of like move a lot. Like, am I stuck on it? Like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. Or am I just like quickly, like fastidiously, not fastidious even, like what's the term that just means like, almost like summarily, or just kind of like just like moving on. Like basically, observers move on with people problems. They're like, oh yeah, people problem, got it, next. And they just move on with people problems. And then they're like, oh man, but I've been trying to change this water pump in my car, and like I got the piece, but it like wouldn't fit. And it's like, like all the thing problems are just a huge pain. Or the decider is kind of moving on with the thing problems, and they're like, oh yeah, that totally didn't work. But did you see how Sarah acted? Could you believe that she was, or you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, which one is like very quick and which one are we just like stuck on? Like we're just kind of, and even could be also stuck on, deciders can be stuck on their own point of view too. Like, am I allowed to feel this? Am I allowed to have this opinion? Does this make me a bad person? Like, it's very much like the people problem. I think, sometimes we see observers in TV shows or something, and they're kind of shown as like the person who's unbothered by the people. Like they each kind of idolize each other. Deciders often idolize observers as being really cool, particularly certain kinds of observers, because they just seem to like courageously jump into the unknown and not really care about, certain types of observers do anyway, not all of them. Some will be more timid and reserved, but then deciders can also, like, they're so beloved in some ways. Like, not to say observers aren't, but like a lot of times the decider genuinely cares about self-other dichotomy, right? And now, of course, there's subtypes, and this is only the first coin. Well, as we get to the subtypes, we're going to see like some deciders are extremely other focused. This is going to be a 13-week series, Sean. I'm here to inform you. We're in a 13-week series. We're going to do one coin each week. No, but basically, like if you are a decider, like the second coin we then look at is, are you a decider who is what we call DE, decider extrovert, or DI, decider introvert? And the DE decider is very much hung up on other people's points of view, and the DI is kind of on their own. And there's complexities there too. So we don't have to get to that coin yet. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is like each of these kind of helps us narrow down. Like the first one, we're kind of like, okay, are you an observer? Are you a decider? Okay, you're a decider. Great. Now, what kind of decider are you? The song of one type of decider, the DE decider, is basically, I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to criticize. I'm not allowed to express. I'm not allowed because, I can't do what I want because I'm beholden and obligated to others. That's the song of the DE. The DI is, they don't understand me. I'm a genius from the future and I'll be studied in 200 years. But until then, all these idiots are beneath me. And, so they're a little more comfortable expressing negativity about people. But even still, they can be afraid to really reveal the depth of their, we might call narcissistic complex, because the DI decider, their whole story is like, I've created an invention that is way ahead of its time. Nobody understands it. I've made amazing music, but nobody gets how good my music is. Did you see the TV show Baby Reindeer? Did you watch that?
Never heard of it.
Okay. It's a really good show. It's on Netflix. Well, the main guy is very much a DI decider, and he's like a stand-up comedian who really sucks. But his whole story is, I'm so amazing, high concept, brilliant comedian. Nobody else gets my comedy. Nobody else, like, he's still stuck on other people's points of view, very classic decider, but he's like stuck on their point of view is wrong, my point of view is right. And if you're a DE decider, which I think you probably are, you're more stuck on other people's points of view have value. Am I allowed to have my own opinion? Does my point of view have value? And so your great growth would be like, yes, Sean, your opinion does have value. Yes, Sean, it's okay if everyone thinks it's good and you think it's bad. It's okay if everyone sees value in it and you think they're idiots and they don't, and, like that's like the healthy development of the shadow. So it's kind of like if you're a decider, you're going to be very imbalanced on the self-other teeter-totter. And you're either going to be really imbalanced, giving too much value to others, trying too hard to see what they like about something, or like the guy from Baby Reindeer, the stand-up comedian, you're going to be so far balanced on the self, you're going to be like, I'm amazing. Nobody else gets it. They're wrong. And you can see that the growth is to kind of go to the opposite. So the DI deciders, they have to grow to see the value of other people's points of view. They have to grow to put themselves in other people's shoes. The DE decider, which is what I think you are, your great growth, and probably something human design helps with tremendously, is seeing that you don't need others' permission to have your own value judgment. You don't need others' permission to have your own reason for doing something. You don't need anyone to allow you to express negativity, and the world's not going to end. And even if people judge you, who cares if they judge you? Screw them. So it's like this kind of feeling of like taking more responsibility for your own desires and being like, you know what? I can do this. I allow myself to do this, because the whole song of the DE is, I'm not allowed. I can't. I wish I could, but I can't. I have so much obligation to other people. I can't do it. I have a family, I have a job, I have financial obligations, I have emotional obligations. I have to do this, I have to do that. It's like their whole song is like the I'm not allowed song. And so the growth is like, well, you actually are allowed. And yes, the world might fall apart. And that's okay. like it's like facing the fear that the second you start doing what you want, the whole world falls apart. Then you do it and you're like, oh, the world didn't fall apart. Then you keep doing it and it does fall apart. And then you're like, okay, well, it fell apart, but I survived. And so it's like this whole story of like going through like all of the blow by blow. So just to kind of clarify, because we are getting to the end of it, I am an observer. I think that was your hunch. So I am the opposite. We help each other so much. Anytime you need to call me, give me a call. I'll make time. I might call you, because deciders and observers really help each other, because each one can kind of help the other by seeing both sides of the coin. You know how earlier I started this by saying the technical name for an observer is a single observer, technical name for a decider is a single decider. It's because you're only getting the single way of seeing it. As a single decider, you're maybe only seeing from other people's point of view. And then because I'm an observer, I'm actually double deciding, they call it. I see from my point of view and I see from your point of view. And I toggle between the two. That's why I can be so balanced about people. That's why I can hold the whole spectrum of like, this person is bad and they're good. This person sucks and they're amazing. This person did a really bad things and they're like a great director or a great actor. You know, like I can kind of like hold both sides, as well as I think I'm right and I also think I'm wrong about some things, and I think you're right and I also think you're probably wrong about some things. And so it's like very like balanced and easy to kind of, it's very like I'm okay, you're okay when it comes to people.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a single decider, a DE decider, then your thing is kind of like you're okay, I'm not okay, like to others, right? Like you might feel like their opinion is valid, but yours isn't. The opposite extreme, the comedian from Baby Reindeer, he's like, I'm okay, you're not okay. He thinks his opinion's valid, everyone else is an idiot. They don't see the value of what he's doing. He thinks he's an amazing comedian. Actually, he sucks. He doesn't know he sucks. He just thinks that they're all too dumb to get it. So you can see that there's these real imbalances. Well, all observers, no matter what kind of observer they are, no matter the rest of the coins, are able to double decide and able to toggle back and forth between self and other perspective. So I'm able to kind of like help you resolve decider issues. Meanwhile, as a decider, you help me resolve observer issues. I'm an extroverted observer, OE, so I'm addicted to the new, and I'm always trying to do new stuff. The OI observers, they're kind of addicted to the old and familiar. Well, I have a real problem with the old and familiar. I have a problem letting go of things and putting them in the past. I have a problem of knowing when to just let go and say goodbye and let it kind of become the past. So I might come to you, Sean, and be like, wow, I'm really like trying to do this thing. And you're like, just let it go, Jonah. It's not important. And I'm like, really? Wow. Like that's really powerful. Like you can give me this really powerful advice because you see the value of both. You see the value of new random novelty. You also see the value of routine and familiarity. You're kind of able to live in both worlds. You're able to like merge worlds in a way that I can't. I live in the world of chaos, of the new and the random. And you live in a world where you're able to blend the new random with the old and stable and sort of integrate them and kind of take the old and the new and work with both of those. So you see that it's really an amazing system. We basically cover the first three coins because each of us is going to either be an observer or a decider. Each of us is either going to have a self perspective or other perspective as our preferred. And each of us is either going to prefer the new random or the old familiar. And so I would say your first coin is decider. Your second coin is DE, preferring other people's perspectives. They nickname it frog in the pocket because oh, cool, I got balloons. New random, I love it. They nickname it frog in the pocket because you might like have a frog in your pocket being like, geez, Sean, did you really have to say that? Or they're, you know, like it's kind of almost like a running commentary of like how you appear, you know, that's the frog in the pocket. And then I think you're probably OE, which is extroverted observer. So even though you are a decider, we each have our own decider and observer functions. Obviously, all of us navigate the world. That and that also would make you, that particular combination would actually solve another coin because they all cross-reference each other, and that would make you a play person. And play people are very energetic and they're willing to spend a lot of energy helping other people, energy for the tribe, very interactive, engaging, able to kind of, you know, they engage well with others and they are willing to I guess you could say process and do with others, processing out loud with people, doing things with people, kind of interactive, engaging all. So those are actually 4 of the 13 coins. And obviously we'll have to do this again. Maybe we can do it same time next week, something like that. I would love that. And or you know, in a couple weeks if you want to take some time to process. But yeah, I think going through these coins, I mean, I'd also love to hear your take on it, but of course we can go deeper into the coins first, so you've had time to reflect. I do have a few minutes. Do you want to process any of that out loud with me as a play person? I'm also a play person, so we do a lot of external processing. Just give me an info dump. The next 5 minutes, just go.
Okay, well, I mean, the first thing, what actually made me more interested in this was when you talked about um, James Alexander, and I think you said he had a celebrity archetype that he ultimately lined up with. It was very similar.
Right, it's
And
James Spader. Yeah, he's very similar to James Spader. And if you're familiar, for anyone watching, if they're familiar with James Alexander, the human design analyst teacher, look up James Spader and you'll see the similarity. I mean, their similarity is striking, and
yeah,
very
well,
different body graphs, by the way.
right. And if you had said, "Who does James Alexander remind you of as a celebrity?" wouldn't have come. But when you said James Spader, I was like, "There it is, right there." Like it was just so clear to me. It was just like my brief interactions. I was like, "Yep, that's how I've experienced the person."
Yeah, he
And
does seem like a highly paid assassin for the CIA. No, I'm joking. Isn't that James Spader's character? He plays like some like he's on Blacklist. He's some like assassin dude.
well,
That's
I
what I
know
was saying.
the character or the guy more from like '80s movies, and then
Okay, that too. Yeah, he does seem like a. Yeah, I don't know how to summarize that, but anyway, but go on. Yeah.
but like that's what caught my attention. Like I need some sort of hook, right? Otherwise, and so that was like, oh my god, okay, there's something to that. And then being a pattern matcher for me, I do look at a lot of charts of famous people because at that point it's just like, okay, well, what has Elon got going on? Why do I resonate with that so clearly? And I would dig deeper, right? So any of that pattern matching stuff, I eat up. As we and my alarm's about to go off here, so just you let me know when.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm actually jumping on my objective personality student study group. So it's actually perfect. We have a little primer here. I'm going to jump on with some students. We do it twice a week, and then we have one class a week. So that's a lot of fun. And
So that's already started. Because in my
yeah, my class started. We're in our 7th week, and it's been just amazing. I mean, having these 16 students, very engaged. We've already typed pretty much everyone. I guess we have one student that we're still kind of on the fence for, but we've already done at least 11, if not the full 13 coins for all the rest of the students. So, and yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work, as you can see, like even just from this conversation, we got through 3 and then be based on the answers for the first 3. There's a 4th coin. Obviously we need to kind of return to them. If we do this again next week, we can go over the coins we already looked at and just kind of short summaries just to make sure we're on the same page and make sure it seems accurate and correct. But yeah, I mean, it's a really amazing system. And the cool thing is once you figure out your type, they have a massive database of officially typed figures, YouTube people, celebrities, all sorts of people. And so we can find your type twin. So we'll find your James Spader. For me, by the way, it's Jason Segel. So I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Segel's work, but he's he played
I Love You Man in that movie.
He's in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. He played David Foster Wallace.
Yeah.
He has a new show called Shrinking. Anyway, if you watch interviews with him, you'll see that there's a bit of a resemblance. But yeah, he's my type twin, and yet completely different body graph. He's a projector, and very different substructure and different centers, and so different from me. And yet, if you watch interviews with him, you'll be like, oh yeah, Jonah does this. Oh yeah, Jonah gets into this role. Like he kind of has a bit of the same cadence and so on.
Super.
Well, let's wrap it up. But it's such a joy being a guest. I'm happy to do it anytime you want to have me on.
Let's figure out if next week works. I'm definitely on board. Just finding a time.
Yeah,
all right, buddy. Well, till next time.
I'm
click that button. I'll try to get the right one this time, and then just hang on for a sec, okay?
Yeah. Okay.